Right, it's 10 p.m. The International Full Soap Timeline is live. The main subject is Operation Yewtree. We've got a lot of ground to cover apart from that. Lucky to get online, actually. YouTube have been messing around with, there's a new system for, I'm not sure if live streaming and live hangouts appear to be two different things now, if they were ever, but good thing I started early. But anyway, I'm live as usual. Not many people here, but I'll continue with this and put it. It will be placed into the archive early next year. Well, I've got a lot of other things to cover, news and various things, in no particular order. What we've got here. This is.
I felt very intimidated and scared. He was a police officer.
This is a woman who claims to have been raped by a Syracuse police officer years ago, a bloke named Chester Thompson. I looked him up, and he was a landlord, so she was a single mother and couldn't pay the rent. So do the math. She claims he raped her. No doubt he'll say she was paying the rent. There's an old joke about that, actually, years and years ago. Landlord at the door in his pajamas and to collect the rent. We had other women accuse him of he was fired eventually. Now I'm not making judgments on this bloke, but a lot of women, as I've pointed out before, a lot of women are attracted to power and to uniforms, the wrong type of women. And so yeah, Thompson actually was pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sex on duty. I think 3 years probation. I mean, I don't know. I mean, these guys really should learn to keep it inside their trousers. I found a ludicrous article about similar to that. It was. On the same, I think it's on the same subject. let's dig it out. This is on Medium, a site which I was writing for briefly, but it's basically complete rubbish. Well, some of the airheads you have on that site are just unbelievable. Let's go to where we were. Current and. Yeah, here we are. But Medium. It's Chester. Yeah. This is absolutely ludicrous, this article. Open letter to Syracuse Police Department. Let's go. What's what I'm doing? It's playing up. Let's take the top out of there. It's open letter to Syracuse police. Open letter to Syracuse city officials regarding the former SPD officer Chester Thompson, and it's the election of a US president who bragged about sexually assaulting numerous women. No, didn't. So as a reminder, we must. This is by Black Lives Matter Syracuse. We must name perpetrators of sexual violence, not just nationally, but in our own community. The coupling of white supremacy with rape culture. Like women of colour disproportionately targets of police violence and sexual terror. Oh my God! They're going to mention Danny Walsklaw. I mean, they're just totally off the planet. These women, these people, they're totally out of their tree. Totally out of their tree. There are police officers who abuse their power, usually for things unrelated to sex, but it's just absolutely ludicrous. So there are, there are a lot of police officers who do that. But anyway, there's an article here. CPS is not to blame as rape charges fall. It's just they're never happier than you think these campaign organisations will be happy that fewer men were charged with rape. No, they want more. It couldn't be that there were fewer rapes being committed, could it? This is from the Guardian by some feminist airhead. There's so many feminists writing for these. Hadley Freeman. This is dated December the 18th, and it's I was surprised how unceasing the abuse was. The fallout from leaving Neverland, which is going on about the Dan Reed film. If you're not familiar with it, this bloke Reed made a 4-hour, quite boring documentary with two men who have falsely accused Michael Jackson of sexual abuse. One is Jimmy Savile, Chuck, and the other is Wade Robson, who's clearly got a screw loose. And this feminist airhead, Hadley Freeman, I mean, she takes these claims. She obviously hasn't done any research on it. She takes it for granted that that Jackson was a serial paedophile. If she'd done any proper research at all, she'd realise that the UK version, the UK version of this so-called documentary, about 3/4 hour, 40 minutes or so, had to be cut out of it because it was such rubbish. And Jackson fans and non-Jackson fans have trashed it. People who've done proper research, and you really have to do some proper research on Michael Jackson to realise that he was actually totally innocent, gullible, stupid, whatever, but totally innocent. Now this is a very interesting story, which was for those who just arrived. For you who just arrived, we'll be discussing Operation Yewtree. Oh, hello. Yeah, hello, Mikkel. I've seen you before. I think I have, haven't I? This is an interesting story. The governor of the outgoing governor of Kentucky pardoned the bloke convicted of given a 23-year sentence for supposedly child rape. A bloke called Mika Shuttle. He served 18 months, and the outgoing governor has pardoned him. When I look at the case, it's caused outrage from the usual suspects and also from prosecutors. But from the little I've seen of the case, there was no physical evidence. So, and it appears to have been based on evidence of so-called professionals, syndrome evidence, which would be either rape trauma syndrome or the child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome. I mean, the child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome is total gold. Hello, the next person. Big turnout tonight. We'll be discussing Operation Yewtree later. We'll go through news and various things at the moment. The child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, it's on the force rape timeline. For those of you who are not familiar with the international force rape timeline, I will give you the URL. It's starting to come up on Google at the moment. It was piggybacking on on my my main website, but that is the direct URL for the full scope timeline. Yeah, the child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome was a bloke named Roland Summit came up with it, and it's like rape trauma syndrome. It's a way of affirming any allegation. There's a long list of behaviours, things which sexually abused kids and rape victims do. It's a way of explaining away, especially delayed reports of purportedly delayed reports of sexual abuse. This is interesting. This is this sort of nonsense affecting women now. I thought this was very unfair. This is a woman named Zara Zara Hyde Peters. She was given a new job as the chief executive of UK Athletics. It turned out that her husband had what's called an inappropriate relationship with a 15-year-old schoolgirl, and she's got the boot before she starts. So, I mean, I'm not sure what inappropriate means in that context, but it's I mean, it is just silly. I mentioned this before, but this is this is an airhead named Moira Donegan. Moira oh no, it's another one, Jessica Levinson. About the Eugene Carroll case, Eugene Carroll suing Trump for rape. She says she's blaming the delay on the statute of limitations. I've made a short video about that actually. Eugene Carroll, who, as you may know, was accused Donald Trump of earlier this year. She accused Donald Trump of raping her sometime in the 1990s in the lingerie department. Excuse me. The lingerie department of Bergdorf Goodman store in New York, which is a big store similar to Harrods in London. And somebody dug out the fact that she based this phantom rape on a 2012 episode of a UK drama series, Law and Order, in which a judge had a fantasy of raping a woman in it. And she was interviewed by Anderson Cooper, who well, it's only when she said she thought rape, most people thought rape was sexy, that he realised that he'd been hacked. Yeah, and there was Maura Donegan was another one who wrote rubbish about. But I mean, they don't do any research. These women, they believe anything women say, anything at all. Yeah, this is another one by Donegan back in September. Kavanaugh should never have been appointed. Impeachment is our only hope. You know, the way they treated this poor bloke is absolutely outrageous. You know, it's absolutely outrageous. These false allegations, but I'm hoping with recent developments they'll clamp down on this now. Prince Andrew, I mentioned this again. I would have. I'm a bit late with this. I've had quite a lot to do this month, so I was lucky to get this one. And it required quite a lot of preparation and research. But 23. You go. Yeah. Where are we now? Yeah. Yeah, that's just more rubbish. This is another one here. This is a report in the London Evening Standard. Met police drop half of all crime probes within 24 hours, figures show. And they drop a lot of rapes. A total of 337,126 crimes reported, and it says a lot of allegations of rape were screened out. It says sexual 300 this year. Five rape allegations were among 387 sexual offences cases screened out. Well, that isn't a lot, is it? Those obviously cases which are obviously false. Senior officers say they're able to make brutal decisions about prioritising resources at a time of severe financial pressures and rising violent crime. No, this is you'll understand why when they come onto Operation Yewtree. They always want more money and more powers. Right, okay, Operation Yewtree it is. For those of you not familiar with it, there was a bloke in England called Jimmy Savile, who was a disc jockey. He did quite a lot of things in his early life, but pardon me. Jimmy Savile rose to fame as a disc jockey and TV presenter, and he also did a lot of work for charity, not just raising money for charities. He did sort of marathons and that, and bike rides and various charity walks. But he did a lot to raise awareness of mental health issues, mental health, and also did a lot for like the spinal unit at Great Missenden at that hospital. It's at Great Missenden. He did a lot of work for that, and he was very high profile. When he died in 2011, October 2011, he was given a funeral fit for a king, literally a funeral fit for a king. The following year, his reputation was totally trashed, and his grave, his headstone was broken up, and there was a big report and everything, and he was branded as a serial rapist. All these women and quite a few men crawled out of the woodwork, out of the gutter, and a few out of the sewer to spew their allegations over him. There was an investigation. Well, big bomb. Last one. Hopefully that's last one. Dame Janet Smith, who I was actually appeared before her, where she was a High Court judge. In the 90s, 1940. She was given the task of conducting this public inquiry, and she concluded he committed 32 or 34 rapes. Because Savile was dead, the police decided to go after live celebrities, and it was an absolutely outrageous witch hunt. We'll be discussing that. Now, Savile had actually been accused of. Now, before let me explain something, which just in case you're not familiar. As Paul Gambaccini, I'll mention him later. Paul Gambaccini's pointed out. How many people do you know? How many people know you? Maybe a dozen, fairly close, 100, 200. How many people can recognise you by sight? A couple of hundred? Well, if you're a celebrity, or not necessarily a celebrity, but if you present a radio or TV program or something, if you've got a high profile, and nowadays almost anybody who has an internet presence, you may be recognised by hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. And not all these people are rational. They're not all sane. They're not all legal, decent, honest, and truthful. Celebrities, celebrities have all, as powerful men and actresses and so on, have always been the subject of gossip. Before the internet, before social media, this was like literally gossip, rumours, occasional leaflet, perhaps defamatory articles in the Sunday press. Nowadays, everybody has a voice. There's over 1 billion people on YouTube, which is good. But the downside of that is anybody can start any rumour, say anything, and if it's a woman claiming it, well, why would a woman lie? So if a woman goes on YouTube, claims passionately that she was raped 10 years ago, why wouldn't you believe her? Savile was he was definitely eccentric, but at the same time he went the extra mile to proclaim his eccentricity. I mean, he dyed his hair blonde. I mean, how many bleached his hair? How many blokes in their 40s do that? He was older when so the BBC Radio 1 and that started. He was and he presented the programme Top of the Pops. He presented the first ever edition, and he co-hosted the last one 40 odd years later. He was a high profile DJ and say an eccentric, a bit of a clown, and some people found I found him rather annoying, but I always thought he was a good guy, and I still do actually. But some people found him creepy, and all sorts of rumours circulated about him. In 1970, he appeared on the front page of the first issue of Gay News, which was proclaimed itself to be Europe's largest circulation newspaper for homosexuals. Fortunately, it went bust, I think, sometime in the 90s. But he appeared on the front page. He liked attention, and he was actually rumoured to be homosexual, because he never married, and how could he not be homosexual? But actually, before his death, a gaggle of should we say evil women started lies about him. There was a school called Duncroft, which Savile himself described as sort of posh Borstal, and a number of women had been at Duncroft as girls, intelligent girls, but with troubled backgrounds. A number who'd been at Duncroft in the 70s came together in around about 2008, 2009, and actually openly conspired on social media to spread lies about him. One woman had been at Duncroft herself, the late Suzanne Cameron Blackie, Suzanne Lundy, as she became known. She was her married name. She was very suspicious because she was at Duncroft. She'd had a troubled life. She was at Duncroft, and Savile was supposed to have been abusing girls there in 1972. Well, it was established he didn't visit Duncroft until 1974, and she called him out. She blogged as Anna Raccoon. And there's another blogger, a bloke called More Larkin. I'm not sure who he is, but he's done a lot of research and showed that it's basically everything about Savile that there was lies. Now, notwithstanding that, I'll get the date right, in October. Give me a second. Yes. Yeah. In October, the 1st October 2009, Savile was Surrey police travelled to Stoke Mandeville. Stoke Mandeville. Surrey police travelled to Stoke Mandeville Hospital, the National Spinal Injury Centre, and they questioned Savile under caution. The child protection team, this is allegations from women who were long adult women. I've covered this before, but I'll cover it again. I covered this in an earlier video. They questioned Savile in depth. He turned up, it was under caution, but he turned up without legal representation, something you're always told not to do. He answered every single question they gave him, every single question, and a lot more. He was 83 at the time, and he basically demolished these claims, and the interview. I'll put this on the website, but it's on it's online. He says here, if I'm quite happy to answer questions because you've done nothing wrong, then you're okay. No, but if somebody alleges you've done something, well, I've had so much of it in 50 years. It started in the 1950s. It's always someone looking for a few quid or story for the paper, and so he turns down to legal representation. The reason for this interview is also we work with child protection and blah blah blah. I received a report from a lady called Redacted. She reported me when she was a resident of Duncroft Children's Home in Staines in the late 1970s. She was told by another girl called that when Jimmy Savile she touched her over her clothes sexually. Oh, out of the question, he says. And he would tell us he would buy us chocolates when she got to the age of 16. Out of the question. Both girls were under 16 when one of them saw him behave inappropriately, put his hand on her groin over her clothes and moved it around, making him aroused. So I'm making further inquiries. Okay, well, 2 further incidents were reported. She was also at Duncroft. She was asked to show the visitor Jimmy Savile around. He asked her to comb his hair, then massage him. Not true, none of it. Then massage his groin area and give him oral sex. Oh, out of the question. And she refused, and finally, and he explains that. So the police say, so these are sort of the main allegations. So tell me what you know about any of these reported allegations. He says, right, the main allegations are completely factual. In fact, they're made up. You can tell they're made up anyway. In your letter, you referred to Duncroft as a children's home, which it wasn't. It was a posh borstal because what could happen? All the girls were there through the courts and under the circumstances, if a parent could afford. Instead of a girl being sent to a borstal, a normal borstal, they could actually pay for them to go to this place. And it was an experiment run by Dr. Bernardo's. And of course, it was a godsend for the parents because when questioned, the daughter was at school in Staines. He says, Alexander Alex was a friend of mine. Anyways, still was, and said, this is not a children's home, Jimmy. These are all young ladies. I said, yes, and of course, they're all upper class voices. And it goes through this, and when he visited it, there was, I won't go through the whole lot, but one time he visited it with, Alex, Princess Alexandra, who was 82nd in line to the throne. When he visited it, he was with Princess Alexandra. And even with minor royalty, there's the security, there's press officers and such. And when the police actually, when they first released that, they redacted her name to make it, to make it seem like as though he wasn't there, as though she wasn't there, and it really had more opportunities for doing these things. Absolute rubbish. Now, what actually that was actually debunked. Savile debunked that nonsense. But after his death, a bloke named Mark Williams Thomas came along and made a documentary about him. Now, Williams Thomas spent 12 years working with Surrey Police. He's nearly halfway to a fat pension, and then he decided he wants a career change. Well, and he went to the media. He was actually, at one point, he was accused of theft or something, or fraud, tried and acquitted, so he should know how easy it is to make false allegations. But I still think he's a bit of a shady character. And he also actually appears to be Jeremy Bamber is innocent. Well, if you know anything about the Jeremy Bamber case, none of these girls reported anything, of course. Now, there are cases in which, at the time, there are cases in which girls and boys won't report stuff. I mean, there was the recent Larry Nassar case, a doctor who sexually abused dozens of girls in the American Olympic team. But that was rather, it's rather different. I mean, he was examining these girls and he digitally penetrated them. But a full-out rape is something different. And Savile, the allegations against Savile spawned all sorts of nutters. I'll give you one. Here's one example here. This is a bloke called.
Numerous examples of these networks of abuse and the individuals involved publicly exposed on my websites. Since I have been non-violently campaigning in and around Edinburgh against these crimes, I've been arrested around 8 times by Lothian and Borders Police over the last 2 years. Although I have been charged with breach of the peace and failing to give a DNA sample on each of these arrests, I've been found guilty on only one charge of breach of the peace. I was admonished.
That's a bloke called George Farker. He's been going around accusing people, mostly problem. There's another bloke as well with the Holly Grid campaign. I forget his name now. But he's going around accusing people of ordinary people of sexual abuse. But you can't do that. You can't do that. And of course, he was arrested. It makes him out to be some sort of martyr, some campaigner against child abuse, when he's just a nutter. Hort Lagrange, Savile was accused of. There was a scandal at Hort Lagrange home in Jersey. He did visit there apparently, but again only with escorts and stuff, and for publicity purposes. I think this is the one. This is Daily Telegraph. Jersey victim breaks silence.
The first word that comes to my head is that he was really strong. I think so. Sexually abused two 14-year-olds.
That's a woman named Dee Coles. She was living at Hort Lagrange. Well, I think Savile did visit there, as I said, but he didn't spend any time there. Now, listen, you may have heard the allegations made against the Prime Minister Edward Heath, because he was, as far as I know, is the only man to enter to become Prime Minister in this country, certainly in the 20th century, who never married, and of course it could only be one thing. This is amazing. This. This is Bristol Community Radio.
Bristol station you can count on. Anyway, the man the NSPCC have called Britain's most dangerous and prolific child molester ever, Jimmy Savile, spent 11 successive New Year's Eves at Chequers, the most powerful residence in the land, as a guest of Conservative Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And today's police report on the 450 abuse crimes Jimmy Savile committed and the 34 known rapes begs the question, why was none of this published or reported in Britain's so-called free press, nor noticed by the police and prosecuted by them until after he was dead?
Because they never happened until after he was dead.
Then there is the Lord McAlpine case. Evidence of McAlpine's innocence from paedophile involvement has still not been tested in court. Chris Patton's BBC caved in and settled out of court. The BBC is, of course, heavily implicated in Savile's paedophilia, allowing sexual assaults to take place on BBC premises. And I suppose we ought also to point out that both Lord McAlpine and Chris Patton are both Tories. There is still our own Bristol case as well. BBC presenter and child molester Peter Rowell, who's now in jail. He was also one of the Prince Charles's ambassadors entrusted with assessing young people as part of the Prince's Trust scheme. So today, maybe some closure for victims and their families if they're still alive, but still no justice. Those that censored the transmission of Liz McKean's December 2011 Jimmy Savile Newsnight expose are still working at the BBC. Only the Director General George Entwistle was given a big payoff to walk. BBC under former Bath Tory MP and Cabinet Minister Chris Patton. Of course, they're both colleagues of each other. So I spoke to Michael Shipton about this very issue. First,
no, this is amazing. Michael Shipton used to be a barrister. Run his name through Google and you'll find out why he was struck off.
to him questions about the Jimmy Savile, and if he thought that the Tory party had really come clean about what Savile had been up to.
I'm Michael Shipton. My day job is barrister. I used to be an immigration judge many years ago. My other job is as an intelligence and national security consultant. I've just written my first major book, Spy Hunter. We weren't getting anywhere in the intelligence community. We were being blocked persistently and consistently in London and Washington. And it seemed to me that only by bringing public pressure to bear on politicians could you actually get anywhere. It's extraordinarily frustrating. Intelligence is about speaking truth to power. But if there's nobody in power able to act on the intelligence, then it's a little bit pointless gathering it in.
I thought it was the Edward Heath bit.
Was recruited as something that Christopher Story published in 2005, something which was confirmed to me by General Obus Marcus Wolf of the DVD and the Stasi. Heath was recruited by the Germans in 1937. I've said this in Spy Hunter. Heath was into little boys, and Savile was supplying them. A number of these boys were taken out of the Haute de Garenne home in Jersey. Savile was taking children from a children's home with the support of German assets in Jersey. Remember, the Germans used to run Jersey. And whenever the Germans overtake somewhere, there's always a stay-behind intelligence organization. German assets didn't pull out of Jersey in 1945. Only German troops marched out, they surrendered. The German intelligence operation in Jersey stayed on after 1945. Jersey was very important for the Germans because of offshore financing, because we do a lot of our offshore financing through Jersey. The banking in Jersey is quite interesting. And what was happening was that children's homes in the Channel Islands, particularly de Garenne in Jersey, children were being taken from these homes, boys, in the case of Heath, as he was gay, and a paedophile, were being taken onto his yacht, the Morning Cloud. There were, in fact, several Morning Clouds, but there was one in particular which won the Sydney Hobart Yacht Race, which was eventually sunk in the English Channel, from memory. But it was the boat that was sunk on which most of the abuse took place. Savile was actually going out he went down to Jersey, and he was actually taking boys. There was another man involved as well, but Savile himself took boys from the children's home, where he was a guest, or welcome, onto the boat. So he was taking boys out onto Morning Cloud. Now, since Heath was well known, and since the boys were talking young men, it depends how you define child, but as a lawyer, one would normally we define children as under the age of 14, which is the age of criminal responsibility. They were about that age, sadly, but they were old enough to know who was abusing them. It's quite clear that in most cases they weren't willing to be abused. But even if they were, at that age, we don't regard consent as informed consent. Defined in the United States of a phrase, statutory rape. The boys were murdered and thrown off the boat. Now, a very courageous Jersey police officer.
What as nutty as you? I mean, how do they know all this? You know, boys just disappearing from children. No, I mean, this is how absurd. And you find this stuff all over the internet. Now, as I said, what happened when this so-called truth about Savile came out, the police and the authorities went wild, and they turned the spotlight on living celebrities who were put through absolute hell. The first was Jimmy Tarbuck, who was a comedian. Now, this is rather interesting because an allegation was made against Tarbuck by a boy, would have been a man at that time. And I'll just find this. Yeah, Jimmy Tarbuck was arrested on April 26, 2013 on suspicion of an alleged assault on a young boy sometime in the 1970s. After that, no fewer than 5 women came forward and claimed to have been sexually abused by him in 1963. Now, there's no way that Jimmy Tarbuck could have been confused with Jimmy Savile. No way. Now, I find this very interesting. That I'm really interested to see if all these women who put forward claims, if they were represented by the same law firm, which I won't name. It's very, very suspicious. He was accused of abusing him at somewhere where he'd never been, certainly not in 1963. William Roach, who at the time was the longest serving soap opera star in the world, he was over 80. He was accused by 5 women of sexually abusing them. He worked for ITV, was the show Coronation Street, and I'm not saying the security at the BBC was bad, but it was certainly better at ITV, and it was shown that there was a process for signing in and that. And he was tried. Tarbuck wasn't tried, but William Roach was tried. He was cleared of all counts. Jim Davidson. Now, this is very interesting because there are parallels here with the Cosby case. If you think Bill Cosby, the American comedian, is a serial rapist, think again. Watch my video on him. Watch my video on the prior bad acts of Gloria Allred, which demonstrates clearly that Cosby was framed as a serial rapist by this corrupt lawyer. Jim Davidson was accused of Jim Davidson's a comedian, has been married, I think, 4 or 5 times. Now he published a book. He wasn't tried, but he published a book called No Further Action, and there were 8 allegations. 7 further. This is pages 124, 125 of his book. There were 7 further allegations. The first was from a woman who accused him of already raping her in the presence of a doorman at London Palladium. After being told there was no public access to the stage door, this scenario could not have happened. This woman changed the venue to a theatre in Slough. Now, this is obviously the police. This is one reason for you should, if you have an alibi for something if you're accused of something in the past, you have an alibi and you disclose it, they'll simply change the date. All these allegations sounded coached. Now, the incident which Davidson describes is remarkably like if you on YouTube you'll find video of Gloria Allred. She has 3 Cosby accusers. One is Linda Ridgway White there. I think I've included it in one of my videos. In fact, I'm sure I have. The Gloria Allred video. And she describes how Cosby isolated her in a room, raped her orally, and it's remarkable. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. And another woman, the late Louisa Moritz, accused Cosby of doing the same thing, but she was foolish enough to give a specific date and a place for it. It clearly never happened. And it's, they make these outrageous allegations. None of them was David Lee Travis. David Lee Travis, his treatment was absolutely outrageous. He was not accused of child sex offences. So I'm informed by somebody who acted for him that it wasn't publicised. One woman accused him of rape, and the police, it wasn't publicised, and the police refused to proceed with it. But he was tried twice. He tried on something like 12 offences. He was cleared on 10 of them. There were, if I recall correctly, there was 2 that were undecided, and they retried him and they added more offences, and eventually he was convicted of 1 offence, some groping offence 20 odd years before, and what they put him through hell, and he's ruined financially. But a bloke who acted for him, a private investigator, William Merritt, excellent guy, he said that if Travis was looking at maybe 8 years in jail for his imaginary crimes. The one that sticks out, it always sticks out in my mind at Travis, is that in 1973 he opened a hospital radio station, and one of his accusers, it was one actually charged, it was just put in to blacken his character. She claimed to have been, she was the carnival queen, or something, the carnival princess. She claimed to have been groped by Travis, and said it caused her 40 years of hell. And somebody had been watching the proceedings, following proceedings, and he, I presume it was he, had said he actually videoed this event. They contacted DLT's legal team, and Travis had turned up with his wife on his arm and an entourage in tow. So it was all bollocks. Which brings us to Paul Gambaccini. Gambaccini is a homosexual. He's never made any secret of that. So it was inevitable he'd be accused by a man. And the man who accused him of it, he hasn't always been homosexual. And as he said, his accuser wasn't in the right year, wasn't even in the right decade. I'm going to play a clip here from him speaking to Radio 4, and I'm going to add some comments.
It was 4:38 in the morning, and so I was arrested by a large number of police officers who removed sackloads of my possessions for 14 months. I was taken to Charing Cross Police Station.
So he was accused of sexually abusing or assaulting somebody in the 70s or 80s. I think it was the 70s in his case. They turn up at 4:38 a.m. Why? Why are they removing property? And what ground? If you prosecutions, they're what they call a two-prong test. There's meant to be the evidential test and the public interest test. And if a case doesn't pass the evidential test, it should not go to the public interest test. What public interest is there in prosecuting somebody who's alleged to have groped somebody 30, 40 years ago? What evidential test? What evidence is there? An allegation. Is that it? If an allegation, look, let's take a scenario. If an allegation had been made at a time against Gambaccini or someone, it was if a boy had said, this guy groped me, right? And they take a witness statement, it's forgotten about. Then 30 years later, he says, that bloke who groped me in whatever was Paul Gambaccini. I can understand that, But these arseholes, they come forward years and decades. Claim to have been molested years and decades later. Why are they seizing his property? It's a fishing expedition. Hoping he's downloading some child porn or something. It's absolutely outrageous.
Where I sat in a cell for 4 hours waiting for a solicitor, because solicitors don't work in the dark. And when one arrived, I looked at the disclosure sheet, as they call it, and I just thought, how dumb is dumb? I grew up within a mile of a hunt club, and I've never smelled so much horse manure in all my life. And so you then think, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'm going to write a book. because
That was your immediate reaction?
yeah, I had 3 immediate reactions. 1, I'm going to lose some weight. 2, I'm going to play the piano more. And 3, I'm going to write a book. You arrest a journalist, he writes a journal. Duh. And they should have known that I would do that. It's very interesting, though. The decision to write a book and the decision to publish a book are 2 separate things. Jim Davidson wrote and published. Nigel Evans has wrote but has not yet published. I could have been dissuaded from publishing.
Nigel Evans being the...
Jim Davison's book was on, I just mentioned that further action. Nigel Evans is a homosexual politician who was accused of rent boys. He'd been having sex with young men and not paying them or something, or whatever. I mean, stupid. It was cleared of all charges.
Yeah, Deputy Speaker House of Commons, and
acquitted. And I could have been dissuaded had 2 people chosen to be decent, honest people, and they chose not to be. I heard them on your program. Perhaps they were sitting in the chair I am in now. One was the superintendent, the commissioner of police, Bernard Hogan-Howe, and the other one was Alison Saunders.
You expected,
yeah, and
you expected police officers to be decent and the DPP. One thing struck me about these people is certainly that those who lower down and make the decisions about charges, they're not very bright. You know, they can't be or they're so effective with feminist propaganda that they just ridiculous. Anyway, carry on.
You asked Bernard Hogan-Howe directly to comment on my case. This was shortly after many of the newspapers had reported my case as a travesty of justice. And he pulled a Michael Howard, Jeremy Paxman, and just changed the subject into a defense of interminable police bail.
But he couldn't have commented on the case, could he? Because it was still ongoing, as they say.
No, by that time it was over. You know, unless they think that cases go on for eternity. You know, they used to say no further action. Now they've changed it, actually. After Jim Davidson's book was called No Further Action, they call it Not Proceeding With. But I just thought, well, okay, here's a man whose organization attempted to destroy my life and my career. And when they fail, as they had to fail, they would not admit error. They would not apologize. They would not say you're innocent.
But
no, they don't have to fail. That's just the point. I'll explain this later.
But the police, you'd accept, have to investigate. Somebody calls the police and they say, we know that this man Gambaccini, from my own personal experience, I know that this man Gambaccini has been doing disgusting things. He assaulted me. The police have to take that seriously, don't they?
Why? 30 years ago? On your bike, mate. Why didn't you report it at the time? Oh, Toto, oh, didn't he have to be believed? Seriously?
Well, they do, but they have to listen carefully. Because in these cases, if the central accusation is false, the details around it are usually howlers. I have found that false accusers gild the lily with details that can't possibly be true. For example, the person I call secondary, who was the one the police went to and asked if he would like to accuse me.
Because there was a first accusation.
Yes, that's right.
And
the case was dropped after 5 months. I didn't even know I was being investigated at that point. So a new officer came on the case. They said, okay, we have to rev this up. Let's find somebody else to accuse him. Hence the Cliff Richard raid. You remember that. So
he's wrong there, because it doesn't matter if they do gild the lily, because as explained when it comes to Rolf Harris, there was no way he could have been at the place he was accused of groping this little cunt, Wendy Wilde. And if you look at the case from the 1980s of Kelly Michaels, a young woman named Kelly Michaels, she was accused of and indeed convicted of perpetrating impossible crimes.
They asked the primary, who can corroborate your story? And he said, well, there's this guy who took horse riding lessons with me in the 1970s. So the police went to him and said, would you like to accuse Paul? They say he did. He, speaking through an intermediary, says he didn't. Who will ever know? They won't give me any transcript or video to show that he did accuse me. Be that as it may, I was told that this guy had claimed to have run into me in Waitrose in Finchley Road. Now, for people who don't know Finchley Road, that's in North London. I live on the south bank of the Thames. I've never been to Waitrose and Finchley Road in my life until we organized a party earlier.
But what was going on?
So what? Doesn't matter. Prove you won't.
thinking in your book was that they were calling, you say they were calling your friends, including Sandy Thompson, and asking whether they knew anybody who might have been assaulted.
Well, it is a tactic of the police to call out and ask if people would like to make accusations. This was brought to my attention by Liz Kershaw of Six Music. 2 weeks before I was arrested, she told me that Yewtree had called her and asked if she would like to accuse Dave Lee Travis. And she said, no, don't you need evidence? And they said, no, we need people who agree. That's the premise. Under this mutation of the British justice system, which has occurred from the centuries-old, internationally respected, objective evidence-based system into the subjective rumor and accusation-based system, there can be no evidence, only people who agree.
Right.
And hence Sandy was called up and asked if she would like to accuse anybody.
So the big thing that you want changed, and we've only got a minute left, I'm afraid.
I'm surprised this bloke didn't go back to America. He's been here most of his life. It's absolutely outrageous the way he's treated.
As a result of all this, what should happen differently now?
Law reform, so that what happened to me can never happen to anyone. We're going to get bail reform, thanks to Theresa May, the Home Secretary. It has been in the Queen's speech. We need anonymity before charge, as recommended by the Home Affairs Select Committee. And we need to look at false accusers and how we treat them. False accusers need to either be prosecuted or offered medical attention.
Medical attention. No, they need to be prosecuted, mate. I've actually met Gambaccini. It was a meeting at he gave a speech at Law Society. There was 3 of them, and I spoke to him. I got his autograph somewhere. No, it's absolutely outrageous. He's actually got a payout. He actually sued the police. He's got a big payout, and I'm glad he had. Actually, I'm starting to say he brought it on himself, but he said that he did a bit of rumour mongering himself, because he mentioned about, I think he was the one who started the rumour about Jimmy Savile abusing corpses in the morgue. Outrageous. Right, now, Max Clifford, the publicist, did come to trial. Max Clifford died in prison. They were intent on him dying in prison. He was given, I think, an 8-year sentence for probably imaginary crimes. One of his accusers that they brought in to tarnish his reputation wasn't a charge. His daughter, Louise, who's actually a diamond, is very, very unlike him. She's got some sort of disability. She's very weak, disabled, so. And he doted on her, and he was in Spain on holiday. One of his accusers claimed that he was climbed in the 2 of them, her and him, were in a jacuzzi or something, and he got her to masturbate him. Well, she didn't mention that at the time, of course, but because it never happened. They were intent on Max Clifford dying in prison. They tried him again, and he was acquitted. And he, I believe he died at 74, and they actually blamed him for his own death, said he didn't take his tablets. Absolutely outrageous. Rolf Harris, this is the one that really does get me, because I've said this before. For some reason, there were 3 people I always associate with my childhood. There's the Queen, obviously, Shirley Bassey, for some reason. My mother used to like her because she used to cry when she's a very emotional singer, Shirley Bassey. And Rolf Harris for some reason. I was very young when he brought out Sunrise. I remember Timey Kangaroo Down Sport. He's a unique entertainer. One of the biggest stars in Britain and Australia, and one of them massive, really one of the most talented entertainers in the world. He had, when he was this would have been in the 80s, wouldn't it? When was his daughter born? Bindi. She's 55 now, so she's 8 years younger than me. She was born She was born. Well, she's 8 years younger than me, so she was born, say, 1964. So it should have been the 70s. Maybe, no, more 80. Well, it would have been early 80s. She had a friend, an anonymous friend, who travelled with her, Harris, and including to a place, exotic Hawaii. And she claimed that when she was 13, when she started traveling with Harris, that he came on to her. He admitted he'd had an affair with her when, well, it wasn't much of an affair actually. He'd had a relationship with her. He claimed it started when she was 18, and that she came on to him. And it only came out after she found out he had another mistress. It actually, he'd had a woman who's dead now. She'd moved. She was a sort of housekeeper. He moved her into a house at the bottom of the garden or something. She was living sort of more or less on the premises. So he was knocking her off. And when it came out, hell hath no fury. And Harris wrote a letter to her parents. This was back in the 90s, as after the affair was over, and he admitted the affair. The same as Bill Cosby admitted having sexual relations with this hag Constand, and if he'd denied what happened, that would have been it. But if he simply denied it, Harris didn't, being a decent bloke, and they trawled the world looking for. The police actually went to Australia to find people to falsely accuse him. There's Wendy Wild, who was in the West Country. She died I think earlier this year. Now she claimed when she was 8 years old, Harris had sexually assaulted her at the Leybourne Park Community Centre in Portsmouth, near Portsmouth. And I did some research on that. There's no way there's no evidence that Harris was there. It was a small community centre, it's closed now. There would have been something in the local paper. He was already quite a big star in 1969, 1970. So if he had appeared there, it would have been. I mean, we had a band and everything. It would have cost. If it had been a charity event, then there would have been something in the paper, something in the papers of the organisation. But nothing. Yeah, the jury actually convicted him of that. And there's this cunt named Tonya Lee, who. She's an Australian. She was in the UK at the time. She was 15. Claimed that Harris had groped her while in a pub in South London, and two of Harris's fans are. He was convicted on all 12 counts. Two of his female fans, who I call collectively Miss Marple, not to be confused with another Miss Marple, who contacted me in connection with the Michael Stone website, which I also run. These two fans, they did carry out their own investigation, and one thing she said was that Harris groped her under the tablecloth, and they pointed out that, well, in Australia pubs have tablecloths, but here they don't. And if Harris had a better representation, he wouldn't have been convicted of that. And after his conviction, somebody, not a million miles from here, contacted him and suggested that he hire William Merritt to investigate on his behalf. Mr. Merritt did. And when the case got to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal quashed the Wendy Wild conviction, but they didn't quash the Tonya Lee one, as they should have done, if they'd done that, they'd have to have given him a retrial. And but they tried to keep him in jail. They tried to make him die in jail. It's absolutely outrageous. The way this guy's been treated, we're led to believe that some of the men who've entertained, most of the men who entertained this for the past half century were paedophiles and rapists. And it's just, and the press coverage has been outrageous at times. Now there were one of the most outrageous. Gambaccini said before that they used him as a fly paper. They put him out there to see what would stick. I was hoping that the public would wake up with the Cliff Richard case, because they gave him a similar treatment. They didn't actually arrest him. It wasn't actually questioned by the police. They waited till he was out of the country. Then they raided his home. They put a camera in the sky. Tips off the BBC, put a camera in the sky. They raided his home in South Yorkshire. They took away some stuff. Again, this was an allegation from, he was meant to have done something, a rally, a Billy Graham rally in the 1980s. Again, he's a male accuser because Cliff Richard's never married, so he can only be homosexual. He's not, by the way. He isn't. They did that to. What they were saying is that to any crank and lunatic out there, come forward and accuse this guy. And if we get enough of you, we can put a case together. That's why they did it. That is why they did it. Fucking evil bastards. This is our police force. They're so strapped for cash they can't properly investigate real rapes and burglaries. Absolutely outrageous, and do stunts like that. That was absolutely outrageous. There were justified convictions with this, Operation Yewtree, but Chris Dunning was one of the first DJs with Radio 1, but he was on the radar for a long time. He'd been convicted in, I think, Poland of sexual abuse. Gary Glitter was convicted. He got a 16-year sentence. He was convicted of attempted rape of a child in the basement of a house that didn't have a basement. Now, nobody will lose any sleep over his conviction, but don't let's pretend that he was convicted of anything other than being Gary Glitter. The only one who wasn't on the radar was Stuart Hall, who was a presenter with that. He's a knockout. He had 2 trials, but even he was cleared of all the major charges. He was accused of rape, and I think he was doing stuff with 15-year-old girls and stuff, which he shouldn't have been doing. But he was cleared of all the major charges, so the jury saw through that. The case that really shows how venal these people are, though, is Ray Terrett. Ray Terrett was a Manchester disc jockey. At one time, he'd been running a record shop somewhere in Greater Manchester. In 1999, he was convicted of sex with a 15-year-old girl, so he was on the radar. He was fairly close to Jimmy Savile, and they went after him. Now, the way they went after him, and they got him, he got a 25-year sentence, which may or may not be deserved. He certainly deserves something. He got a 25-year sentence, but it's very interesting, this, because there were 3 accusers, and the police were very, very careful. They kept the accusers apart. They didn't let them have details, right? So there was no cross-contamination. And they actually found physical evidence against Terrett. The house where he lived, there was a notice board where girls would sign I love you, Ray, that sort of stuff. And actually physically cut that out of the wall and took it to court. So Ray Terrett's conviction was sound. So why didn't they approach all the others like that? Yeah, instead of encouraging people to make allegations against them, because they're cunts. That's why. Total. It's rather interesting that after the Savile business came out, Esther Ranson said she had no idea about what Savile was doing. Why she had no idea? Well, the probable reason is this is a story from January 7th, 2017. How Google refused to take down vile slurs branding me a child murderer. You know, actually in the 1990s she sued her over defamation or something. She started child line. She's very well meaning but gullible. I bought lunch for her restaurant once. You know, there's nutters out there. They join up imaginary dots all over the place. So Esther was seen with Jimmy Savile, who was doing unspeakable things. That's what she must have been doing it, you know. And this is you know, to some extent, this is unavoidable in the age of social media. But there was no real discussion of these people being innocent. Paul Gambaccini and Cliff Richard, because they weren't charged. But I mean, just it's absolutely outrageous. And this is not a new thing. Since then, we saw this witch hunt of the posthumous witch hunt of Edward Heath and the ludicrous VIP paedophile ring. And while the police, I mean, how many genuine rapes and maybe a few murders could have gone unsolved while they were doing this sort of thing? And you know, they arrest people for when there's no need to, but seizing their property, you know, seizing computers and stuff for other allegations that happened in the 1980s. Absolutely outrageous. I've got no, you know, I mean, well, I've got no time for the police anyway, but there's this, it shows you just how absolutely outrageous they are, and they're collaborators in the CPS, and you've got these pressure groups, anti-rape groups and so on, which, you know, they're not satisfied that they want more convictions. They don't care how they get them. As I say, this wasn't unique. We've seen these sort of things. We had the Satanic Panic, had that in the US in the 1980s. It came here. We actually had the big cases in Australia, New Zealand. I think certainly been nursery false allegations in New Zealand nurseries. To some extent, it's been on the continent in a non-English speaking world. Well, the whole world speaks English, but countries where English is not the first language. In places like Germany, they have statutes of limitations, and they want to get rid of statutes of limitations. It's just outrageous. There needs to be a return to what was called traditional policing, but there's no sign of that. You know, but what happened was there's not unique. We've seen this with trawls of children's homes and with institutions and such. So it's just absolutely outrageous. You know, I mean, I've got one or two other things to go, which are not unrelated. I'm sure I mentioned these. I've got some files here which I dug out recently, so you can see for yourself. Chester, I've done him, remember. This is very interesting. Whenever you hear about child sexual abuse, this is from the Marley by Mercury, November 20th, 1943, page 2. I came across this. I was doing some research on censorship. I found this by mistake, by accident. Scoutmaster jail for serious offence. Harold Thornton, Private Worcester Regiment, acting as a scoutmaster of Paddington, was sentenced to 1 month's imprisonment in Marylebone Police Court on a charge of indecently assaulting a scout. The accused family and that of the boy were well known to each other. On the day of the offence, the accused took the boy out to the scout shop to lunch and then took him back to his house where he committed the assault. Before parting, he made the boy swear on Scout's honour not to tell anyone. The boy, however, was suffering from shock, told his mother. His mother found out about the matter and told the police. The accused, when seen, said he must have been mad and said he was very ashamed of himself. So that is, you know, when kids, unless they're groomed, the boys and girls will report. There's an example. I'm not sure if I put this on. No. There's I don't think I put it on here, but there's a video that the BBC made in 1995. Charles Napier. There was a, you know, how to call it, paedophile ring. It was only largely only two of them, but Charles Napier got a 12-year sentence after pleading guilty to historical offences a few years ago. In 1995, I think it was 1995, the BBC made a video in which they actually found film of him grooming boys in Sweden. He was kicked out of Britain. Well, he wasn't allowed to teach in Britain. He went to Sweden. He was presumably teaching English. And there's film of him grooming boys with alcohol, giving young boys alcohol and encouraging them to do horrible stuff. So, I mean, generally speaking, unless a kid is thoroughly groomed, they're going to tell. So this is another reason I don't believe all this crap about large-scale sexual abuse of kids. Here's another story I found. This is from the Nottingham Evening Post, February 23rd, 1985, page 7. About a widow, 80-year-old widow, woke up to find a naked stranger in her bedroom, and she fought him off. A 49-year-old Donald Michael Tilley. He got 2 years for attempted, only 2 years. He should have a lot more than that, you know, he would now. They pinned it outside around intercourse with him. She fought him off from still there when the police arrived. So an 80-year-old woman could fight off a sex attacker, or could fight, you know. There's another one here. Woman fights off attacker. This is from Yorkshire Post. Sex attacker put to flight by a woman 29. This is Yorkshire Post, July the 1st, 1983. Front page. Sex attacker put to flight by a woman 29. A woman fought off a sex attack yesterday, 2 miles from where a girl of 18 was raped last Friday. Balby Road, Doncaster, where she grabbed from behind my man. He put his arm around her mouth and threatened her. She screamed. She had her head and face by a shoe as her attacker tried to pull her into the car park, but she managed to wrench the shoe out of his hand, shoe, and throw a punch at him. He fled. The woman was badly shaken, suffered slight facial injuries. So, you know, women fight back. They don't, I just froze. They don't just freeze most of the time. So, you know, and there's one more here. This is woman fights off muggers. This is the Telegraph, Bradford Telegraph and Argus. That's it. Soldier death shot. Doom factor. The back page. Oh, yeah, it is. This is rather small print. This is Bradford Telegraph and Argus, August 12th, 1982, front page. Woman fights off muggers. Come on. Where are we? Woman fights. It's scruffy robbers. Woman fights off muggers. A 57-year-old woman was dragged to the ground but uninjured after 2 years tried to snatch her bag in a dimly lit Bradford road late last night. The woman was with her husband in Clarges Street near Little Horton Lane when two coloured youths sprang from behind. The woman fell to the ground where she refused to let go of her bag and the used ran off. So, you know, if a woman could defend her bag, other women could defend her honour. Now this is something. This is I'm going to put this. I haven't put this on the timeline yet, but I don't think I will do. A mass email was sent out to students and staff and members of the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, after a student reported she'd been raped Wednesday night. This is October 29th, 2008. After the investigation was conducted, she finally admitted to fabricating the entire event on Monday morning. Now, a lower cases of false rape accusations and few far between, according to Amy Feith, Director of the Rape Crisis Centre. It's still a highly sensitive, detrimental issue. The female student who cannot be named, whose name can't be released in order to protect her privacy, about this story. Now, this is outrageous. This is where it's outrageous. She had to do him. A guy she knew inside pulled a knife on her and forced her to cooperate. We launched 2 parallel investigations, one into the crime, one behind the scenes, where we did an audit of keys and checked video systems. Officers interviewed people who lived near the victim as well as the alleged assaulter. He had a rock-solid alibi. And on Monday afternoon, the victim, she's still a victim, and she admitted she made it up. So, and I don't consider this case best to be referred to criminal court, but I dismiss the idea of charging her. Well, she accused someone, of a named individual, of raping her at knife point. Right? What if this guy didn't have an alibi? Yeah. So that's anyway. If you haven't checked out the False Rape timeline, please do. I've not done much shit like that. I did four entries earlier this week, including 2 genuine ones. Carroll DeRonch, who was attacked by Ted Bundy, fought him off, and a woman who fought off Rodney Reed. Incidentally, the Rodney Reed case, which is in the news at the moment, they say this guy, they're protesting this guy. He's not innocent. Rodney Reed is a serial rapist of the worst type and also a murderer. So anyway, that's Operation Yewtree. I haven't got a specific entry for Operation Yewtree on the timeline. I would add it when probably add one when time permits. But there's quite a lot of stuff on there anyway. There's Rolf Harris on there, for example, and Matt Clifford. So thank you for coming. It's still got 3 people. I may do a test broadcast at some point with this, because they keep messing around with YouTube. Well, firstly it was this restricted stuff and that, and now you have to say if your stuff is suitable for kids. Now the worst thing, they've altered the live streaming and hangouts. So hopefully I can save this video and edit out the bit at the beginning and the non-stuff at the beginning, and put it online, public, Sunday or Monday. And this is actually number 30 now, and the other 29 you will find at the Internet Archive. So thank you for coming. Anyone wants to contact me, you know where I am, and there will probably be another one early next year.